My name's Sasha Pete and I'm joined by a fantastic individual. This man played in arguably one of the greatest NSL teams of all time. None other than the great Steve Iosifidis. Welcome, Steve, to this conversation.
Hey, Sash, thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to chat to you tonight.
Fantastic. And we'll talk about your exploits over at the championships that you won and the fact that you represented Oceania in Brazil. But let's first, how did you fall in love with our great game?
That would have to be my dad. He was one of the founders of, as you probably know, Altona East Polk. He was one of the, as I said, the early founders where, him and a group of his friends, Greek in background, they got together and they thought the best option to have their kids sort of playing a sport that they loved and they obviously grew up with and they felt passionate with as kids. They said to themselves, well, we're better off having our kids playing at a soccer club than roaming the streets. So and that's where it all started. And Dad used to take me to plenty of games as a kid, any sort of live games, whether it be Heidelberg and South Melbourne, even like the likes of Footscray Just and Melbourne Knights and Gully and Georgie's and whatever was around, whatever was close. Dad was just a big fan of football or soccer, if you like. So yeah, he was the driving force behind my passion for the game, I would say. Yeah.
And you're a local to the Altona region, so that soccer club obviously was integral to your junior development. When did you first start playing for Polk?
I started playing at around eight years old. I think it could have even been earlier, but at the time there was no. I think the earliest competition for any youngster was at the age of 9. So competitively, I started playing at the age of 9, right through to 8 or 9, right through to 18, and that's when I sort of parted ways with my father's beloved club and went off to play for my first NSL club, being Heidelberg, for the next 3 years. Yeah. Yep.
So your time at Altona, I mean, you were sort of a no nonsense defender. As a young boy growing up, where did you gravitate to the pitch?
Funny enough, I actually started off as a bit of a striker initially. Yeah, started off as a striker, and people who will actually end up listening to this will probably laugh, but I was scoring goals for fun. But at the age of around 15, I think one of my coaches actually threw me in the back line, and I did okay because I think our defender got injured, and they didn't have anybody else, so he thought, okay, so I'll throw Steve in there, see how he goes, and we had a few clean sheets, so he decided, well, this is going to be your new position.
Okay.
And from that day onwards, I remained as a defender. So my striking days ended. It only lasted for a couple of years, but yeah, it didn't last too long. But
you said you scored goals for fun. So if I was to come over, you definitely still got those trophy goal scoring the trophies from Polk under 12s, 13s.
Yeah, well, now I'm in a bit of trouble, actually, because back then there weren't many trophies getting thrown. There was no top goal scorer trophies. It was only your participation trophy, I think. So, all
right, I'll take your word for it. I'll take you. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so this move, this idea, not probably too dissimilar to many of the other smaller Greek clubs. Me growing up not far from Polk at Western Suburbs. The emulation of the young boys, the Greek boys, you gravitate to either a Heidelberg or a South Melbourne. As a supporter, where did your family gravitate towards? Was it the Heidelberg side of things, or was it South Melbourne?
Dad used to take us to Heidelberg. He was a Heidelberg fan, but it was one of those situations where if Heidelberg played away, we would go and watch South Melbourne. Okay. It was just one of those. We weren't really one of those
one camp or
die hard. Yeah, that's right. Because Dad, as I said, he was big on just watching live football, and all he wanted to do was just share that experience with his kids. So we used to jump in the car, and whether it be Heidelberg that we went to or Middle Park back in those days. They were predominantly the two biggest, but it wasn't. He was a Heidelberg supporter.
And when you were growing up, who did you try to emulate? You're this forward come centre back, and now you're 15. You're going to watch these other NSL games, either wherever it is. Who are you looking at to think, okay, I like a little bit of this or a little bit of that?
I was actually a big fan of Mem Durakovic.
Wow.
I just thought he was he for me, he represented what Aussies are all about. He would just go out there and play with everything he had. Technically, was he as good as maybe a Joe Simonich or some of the other greats, maybe Ned Zalic, or maybe not, but he absolutely made up for it in every other area. He let his actions do more talking than any sort of technical or tactically skillful player. So he was definitely one that I absolutely looked up to, and I had the privilege of playing with later on in my career. Yeah,
and what better way that you're in the stands watching him play, and from memory, he would just give everything, and he'd like to get forward as well. He really I'm sure there was
he would, I think the game evolved though when I was sort of playing, where players were expected to do their job and do their job only, nothing more. And if they tried to do anything outside of their role and it didn't come off, there were consequences.
Okay.
So in the day, you had a sweeper. Even at international level, you had a sweeper going on Maisies, taking it from the back line and dribble, like the old Mateus, for example, taking on 5-6 players and scoring a goal. Whereas these days, you don't really see that much. A defender generally defends, a midfielder does their job, and a striker does their job. And anyone that can do all three is pretty special.
Yes.
So yeah.
So what was the move that sparked from East Altona to Heidelberg? How did you? So you played in the youth system there, or?
No, actually, I actually got asked to go and. I initially went and trialled for South Melbourne. I got asked to go and trial for South Melbourne. This is at a time where Jim Pagolios was the coach, and it was over a weekend. They were having a practice game, and they invited me along. And I remember Jim pulling me aside. I was only 18, I think I was, and he said to me, "Listen," he goes, "You're probably not ready to play at this level just yet." He goes, "You may want to go out and have a few years at Heidelberg, and then if you're ever ready, I'm sure we'll poach you, and we'll bring you across." So I was actually pretty disappointed at the time, because I thought, this is my first trial ever, and is this how soccer's it's not meant to make you feel this way? But having said that, it actually built a little bit of hunger for me because I was playing in State 4 at the time, State 4, which was 5-6 levels away from the top grade. So I think it was about a month or two later, the good old-fashioned Greek Cup, the Hellenic Cup, they used to call it. I don't think it's around these days, but we actually ended up winning it in the State 4.
So Park won that. In the last year, Park, you won that. That's quality.
Yeah. So at that point there, I got a call up at Heidelberg for a trial.
Right.
And I remember rocking up, and there was was roughly around, there's about 150 players trialing, not all in the one night, but on different nights there were, there was 20 or 30 of us trialing. And on the very last, I think it was about a week, and on the very last day, he's called everyone in, and he's thanked everyone, and he said, I'm actually going to keep 2 players. So thank you everyone for trialing. Yeah, it was about 150. Yeah, I remember it was huge. And so we, all the boys actually turned around and we all walked away, and all of a sudden I get a tap on the shoulder. And they kept me and another boy. I can't remember his name, but there was just the 2 of us that they kept.
Wow.
A guy by the name of Dusan Brinovic. He was the he was the one that was responsible for signing me up, pretty much.
And you were just on that. Was that circa around the time that Heidelberg then ended up becoming Collingwood Warriors, amalgamated with the AFL team? Is it just before or just after?
Yeah. So fast forward 3 years at Heidelberg, and that's when they merged with Collingwood.
Okay.
And at the time, obviously, it was Zoran Matic who was coaching him, and I did the whole pre-season, and I just finished playing. At the time, we got relegated as well. Heidelberg did, from the National League to the Premier League. Yeah. But Zoran Matic was watching us play the last 3-4 months, and I think he was happy to keep the squad, and then slowly he would have sort of carved away as it got closer to the new season, the new A-League or NSL season. Funny enough, in the meantime, as we were getting closer to the league starting as Collingwood Warriors, Ange Postecoglou reached out and said, "Listen, I understand that you haven't signed up yet, and I'm interested in having you across to South Melbourne." And that was, for me, it was a pretty big buzz. And I thought to myself, well, I've always been one to be quite loyal and not do the wrong thing. And I actually told Ange at the time, I actually want to give Zoran an opportunity. I want to sit down and ask him where I fit in his plans, and I'll be more than happy to come to you once I understand or know exactly what that looks like. So had a chat to Zoran, and Zoran, I think at the time he had a pretty big squad. He had a pretty big squad, and he actually he signed up some pretty key players. Human Taliadoros and Loza. Loza was there. Frank Juric was there, and he was slowly building on these high-profile players. I mean, in all fairness, I wasn't a high-profile player at all. And to have someone like Ange sort of tapping my shoulder. So anyway, after that discussion with Zoran, I felt that I was probably not going to be in his squad. It was only a couple of weeks to go before the start of the season. Otherwise, I would have already signed a contract. So I actually, I ended up going and joining South Melbourne.
So Dusan, was Zdravko Luic there at that time with Zoran Matic? Was that that?
No, so I was only with Zoran during pre-season. Okay. So before that, predominantly my coaches were Sakalarovic. He was my coach in my first year. Michael Uricalo was my second year coach.
Yes.
And third year was Andy Bazikas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you featured, you had some games in both the team. Who were some of the characters in that Heidelberg? Who were the prominent players at Heidelberg?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, so we had guys like Dougie Hodson. We had Alan Scott. We had Gary Bratton, who you probably know, his son at the moment plays for Sydney. He was my first captain, actually, at Heidelberg. Yeah. We had another boy called Nedeljkovic. He was from Serbia. George Georgiades, Tommy Karapatsos, Michael Hadzitrifonas, Sammy Frangos. So there was a few boys that were roaming around. That was my first year.
Yeah.
Wadey actually came in. I think it may have been my second year actually. second or third year, Paul Wade ended up finishing with South Melbourne. And he thought he would give it one last crack with Heidelberg, but I think I think his body had given way by then. But absolutely gem of a character though to have in the change room. Eric Vassiliadis was another one. So yeah, we had a few characters at the time. Yeah.
And the what was that sort of? So you're playing at a decent level. Did you find that you said that it was about doing a job, neutralising one of the forwards, ensuring that they didn't score, and then just passing the ball up the line?
I think at a time when I first got to Heidelberg, I played I think the first half of the year in the youth. So I didn't really get much of an opportunity to play in the senior team. And after some, I think the results were quite poor. The performances weren't that great in terms of how they were tracking in the season. And I was given a bit of an opportunity in my first game, and I actually played right wing. And I remember this.
Wow, there you go. There's your junior.
Yeah, that's right.
Coming to
yeah. So I remember we played against Morwell Falcons. Again, Jonesy was actually playing in that game as well. I think Archie was playing as well.
Okay.
And after 12 games of, I think it was only the one win, we ended up winning that game, and I'd set up a few goals as well. So so that was a pretty good debut game for me. And then we went to Marconi the second game. We actually ended up, I think it was a draw. We drew. Steve Corica was playing, and Mark Schwartzer was in goals. And
wow.
So it was pretty, it was pretty special. It was pretty special. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Back then, did you end up going the night before? Did you fly in of the day of the game just to save on the accommodation? Fly out?
Yeah, no, generally the day of the game. We would go the day of the game because we'll just fly in and fly straight back out. Yeah, unless obviously in my South Melbourne days, there were other teams like New Zealand or Auckland or Perth. Those sort of games there, we would travel the night before.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you've sort of experienced the highs and lows of playing at Heidelberg, first making the side, then getting relegated, then playing in the Premier League, and then the evaluation back with Martic, and you're figuring, look, I might not be in his plan. I might not be in his plans, and it's you get a call for a glamour side. I mean, let's be honest, that South Melbourne has always been, at that time, it was the club to be at, particularly if you're of Hellenic background.
Yeah.
So what did that feel like, getting that call? You talked about that call from
Ange. Oh, he was. I think. I mean, those who know Ange, or those who have been part of his circle would probably know that he's one where I think after one conversation with him, you would run through brick walls for him. Like, he's just got that presence, or that there's just something about the guy where I after that one conversation, I wanted to play for him. I had made up my mind that he was the one that I want to be playing for. And yeah, it was pretty special. I won't lie. As a young kid going to Middle Park days and watching them play and looking at some of those greats, way greater than I'll ever be. But and then all of a sudden being asked to sign a contract for them, and 7 years later with some pretty decent achievements, I would say. I have absolutely no regrets at all signing.
So are we talking around, like, is your first year at South around the mid-90s from memory?
Yeah, that's right. It
was 96.
96. Yeah, that's 96. Right. 96. Yeah.
And you get this call for not being good enough under Martic's Heidelberg, or sort of on paper, maybe you're not featuring in his plans, or as like you rightly said, he would have offered you a contract. to get this call from Ange. And that year, you guys had a pretty good year. Talk to me about the characters that are in the dressing room of your first year at South Melbourne.
First year was actually quite an interesting year because Collingwood Warriors at the time started off like a house on fire.
Yeah.
And I went to a club where, yes, absolutely a big club. This was Ange's first year as a coach. So he was only a young guy. He was only, 32, I believe?
Look, I need to correct. It's his second year as a coach because his first year as a coach was at Western Suburbs.
Western Suburbs, sorry.
So,
okay. Well, fair enough. So in the NSL level.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'd gone across there, and I was starting to scratch my head thinking, what have I done here? Because the first 8 games under Ange, we actually we weren't doing too well at all. Where Collingwood started off like a house on fire, and you start to think to yourself, what have I done? Have I made the wrong move? And you start to regret the decision, and but I remember, I also remember this so very clearly. I remember it was round 8, and Ange literally he came into the change room, and this was his pre-match talk. He's pretty much said to us, listen, he goes, I'm going to be honest, if we don't win tonight, this could be my last game, pretty much. Could be my last game. It's a big club, and it's probably not fair that the way we've been in terms of the actual results. It's not fair that I stay on if we continue the way we're going, and just to let you know that I have absolutely no regrets with the players that I've brought into this room, but also letting you know that I could be out of a job tomorrow and literally lining up at Centrelink pretty much if we don't get a result today. And that's not any way to make you guys feel guilty, but just letting you know I'm proud of every single player in here, and I just wish you boys all the very best, for tonight's game. In that game there, he had 3 internationals on the bench. He had 2 Aussie Socceroo players and a Kiwi international on the bench. And he went out and took a pretty big risk with playing some maybe not as high-profile players as these other guys. From that day onwards, we did not lose a game in 4 years at home. From that game onwards, yeah.
Wow.
And Ange obviously moved on to bigger and better things after that, But that game there, I'm actually getting goosebumps talking about that game because it was pretty risky, the sort of move that he made, bringing on players that maybe weren't as regulars as those others, but yeah. So I mean, and I think that we actually ended up playing. We played, I think it was Sydney United that night, and those that team there, I think were, they had some pretty, they had superstars in that team. So,
yeah.
But yeah. So that's my first year. We ended up 3rd for the year. We just missed out on the grand final. So Sydney United went on to win it.
Yeah, and
Well, actually, no, it was Brisbane Strikers went on to win it, I should say.
Against
Sydney United. Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in a year where Sydney and Croatia were probably the best team all year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So tell me about the types of characters that are in that first year dressing room. So the Kiwi international on the bench I've had right here on this podcast. So Vaughan Coveney. So that was one of them.
Yeah, that was one of them. We had Warren Spink, Jason Pollock. We had players, obviously the great Paul Trimboli, Mickey Peterson, David Clarkson, Steve Panopoulos, the young Michael Petkovic at the time, goalkeeper, Blatsis, Orlich, Diamichis was just signed up from the Knights.
Yes.
Who else? In that year there, Lozanovsky wasn't there. He got signed up the following year with Johnny Anastasiadis. Yeah. So they actually both won a title in their first years. So, Yeah, so there's a good blend of obviously youth
Yep.
and senior players.
Yep.
Yeah, in that year.
So the Ange turns it around with that very honest pre-game talk. He definitely has a philosophy of play now. Did he have a philosophy of play in his early years? Because you were with him from his first, so let's say, serious coaching role at South. Did he definitely have a very set philosophy of play?
In terms of his philosophy, I mean, I think he was just big on. I mean, possession was his biggest thing. So he would never ever tell a player who to play to or where to play, because I think that just messes with the player's mind. You know, if a player had a decision to pass to his left and he's got the coach in the back of his mind thinking, oh, maybe I should have passed to the right. So he would never ever, put that on any player. Possession was a big thing though. If you lost that ball, and if there weren't any options around the player with the ball, he was massive on that, very big on that. So he literally wanted players running off the ball and having the player on the ball having three or four options, and yeah, God help you if you did lose the ball or turn the ball over in the wrong area. You know, he was very big on that final third, and he was big on having those players being creative, and that's, I guess, that's what people come and pay money for, to see that X factor or to see that creativeness from those sort of high profile players, you know, scoring goals or whipping balls in, but from the middle of the pitch and defensively, it was almost clockwork. It was literally clockwork. You could not lose the ball, and he was big on just, you know, moving that ball quickly and as quickly and direct as possible.
Okay.
So yeah.
So it's penetration over possession. So try and move the ball as far up the field and options. I mean, you can see I think it's evolved. There's layers to that now. There's like, you think about how Australia won the Asian Cup, or how he played his football at Brisbane, and then to that so I think there's come an evolution, but there was some basis to that overall gameplay, attractive football, many options, keep the ball, but okay. What about defensively? Because I mean, Andrews played his whole life at the back
as a defender. Yeah.
So what was his mindset defensively?
Yeah, he was. Andrew's big on not conceding goals. He was, and I'm a big believer of this as well. I think, and a lot of strikers and those offensive players might disagree, but he was always big on, strikers winning you games, absolutely, but defenses winning you championships. He was very, very big on that, and he was big on, not conceding goals. And I think even around the world today, you look at those championship teams or teams that are winning titles, they've conceded the least amount of goals. So he was very, very big on soft goals, not conceding, absolutely not conceding. So he wasn't too worried about, strikers missing opportunities. He always felt that there was enough quality in the team to score goals, even though we may miss an opportunity or two, but he had no tolerance for soft goals, absolutely nil. And if there was an error from a particular individual, he would correct it pretty fast. And you would have that in the back of your mind, knowing that there was no room for any errors.
Okay. Was he like in those early years, was he aggressive at the team, or did he put his hand around players, or was he calm?
He was very, very calm. He had this calm demeanor about him, and he absolutely wouldn't get especially during training or whatever. He would never get angry, or you wouldn't see that side of him. But you knew that there were 50 pairs of eyes watching you, regardless of where he stood on the pitch. You know that he's watching you, and so even at for me, training was more difficult than match day.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. You did not want to be making mistakes during training. Training was, I felt, even though there was we obviously didn't have supporters and fans coming to our training sessions, but I felt more pressure during training than actual match day. I really did. I just felt that if the more mistakes that accumulate during training, it's just an excuse or a reason for him to drop me on come match day. So, and I think everyone felt that pressure, and they all felt that almost anxiety that he was watching you. He was watching your every move, not just on the pitch, but even also off the pitch, your behaviour, what sort of character you were in the change room. And he was always, I think he was always big on doing the team thing first. You know, if your goals weren't in line with the team, then you wouldn't last. Under Ange's watch, you wouldn't be a long-term player under Ange. No.
The another person that I'd like you to talk about that's probably very sort of subtle in nature, but he was definitely a leader at South Melbourne, was Paul Trimble. He obviously played many games for the Socceroos and was very much a darling of the South Melbourne faithful.
Yeah.
What kind of leader was he around the pitch? Because if, you know, to me, South had many sort of big name players, but he would be, if you would call it a marquee, he was definitely that sort of the centre forward, that false nine, that skillful silky nine.
So I think in every team, I think I mentioned it earlier, everyone's got a role to play. You know, as a defender, you get paid to defend and not concede goals. Excuse me. As a striker, you get paid to score goals. So everyone sticks to their pretty much their job role. Then you have that one player that it's an open book. There's a blank piece of paper, and it's almost as if he's got the license to pretty much do whatever he feels is right for the team. And that was Trimmers. Like, there was no such thing as a false nine, even though he wore number 9 on his back. You know, he would at times go and collect the ball off the goalkeeper. You know, what number 9 does that these days? You know, so he was one where he would go and collect the ball off the left back, you know, and play around with it in the back line. And then 2 minutes later, he's up in the forward line, you know, having a strike on goal or scoring a goal. So, he's absolutely, for me, he's probably one of the best players I've played with at not one of, he definitely is the best player that I've played with at South, and arguably the greatest player of South's history, I think.
Yeah, so definitely.
Maybe that's not fair on some of the players before me or, you know, before my time, but I'm only talking from as a kid watching him play. And obviously, as I got a bit older and then I actually played alongside him, I would have to say that he's consistently a player where, regardless of what the scoreline is, regardless of what the momentum is during the game, where, you know, you've got games where you're under the pump and you're leading 1-0 and you're literally defending for a whole half, and he would not shy away from presenting. He would not, regardless if he would have 2-3 players up his, defending him on his back, and he would still be asking for that ball, you know. And as a defender, that's a beautiful thing, because you know that option is always there, you know, from him. So
definitely technically brilliant in terms of, you know, could turn on a dime. And, you know, in around the box, you probably have to mark him on occasion at training. So he'd probably be able to put the ball between your legs as well. So what was it like marking him at training? Was that he
was definitely he was difficult to mark, especially if you decided to overcommit. He would make you look foolish.
Okay.
Because he's had a low center of gravity, so he quite easily, he didn't favor one side. He could turn to your left, turn to your right, and then suck you in with the right, and then turn to the left, and vice versa. He was just, for me, he was a true footballer. He had the perfect football brain. You know, he was not a step or two ahead of the rest, and that's what made him so different to an average player like myself. So he was one where, probably could have played in any team, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so
Across
yeah,
the country.
definitely one of those players that probably could have and should have gone overseas and played at a outside of the NSL. But we got to see him play here. You didn't have to wait long before you won your first flag at South Melbourne. So talk to me about the lead up that year.
Well, Well, we ended up third in my first year, and I was quite hungry to go out and to win a title because we got so close. And I think this is where Ange was. He was very, very good. When he used to bring a team together, he would look for players who had that same hunger. Where if you had won something previously, and he didn't see the hunger in your eyes, he wouldn't keep you on. He wanted players that were hungry, and as I said earlier, with putting the team first and the team goal, his theory was you do the team thing first, and doors will open for you on an individual level. So, but anyway, so I was pretty hungry to go around second year and obviously win a title. And I actually got injured. I was out for the first, I think, 6 weeks. I had to have an arthroscopy on my knee and have a clean out, and I was absolutely gutted. Yeah, I was gutted. Loza also played his first game for the club, and in the same game he played, first game, got injured, and he was actually, the two of us were in rehab together, probably for the first 6 weeks, I think, first 6 weeks of the year. So we slowly, did our rehab together. We became pretty close, and and even to this day, we still remain, fairly close. And we came back at the same time, and we got to a grand final, obviously against Carlton at the time, and we won our first flag, and it was my first flag. It wasn't Loz's though. That was his second, I believe. But it was the first flag the club had won in 7 years. Yep. So, which was pretty special. I remember at the time that at Olympic Park days, which is no longer there. I try telling my kid these days that I played here and I've won a premiership here. And my son's response will prove it. I don't see no stadium here. All I see is Amy Park. So, it was really special memories.
That game was quite controversial.
It was.
That goal. I mean, but so the person who scored that goal at the end, I've also interviewed. He talked about South Melbourne having a heavy shirt. Did you feel like the South Melbourne shirt was heavy?
I did. Yeah, it was a tough. It's probably the toughest school I've actually have had to go through. I think it's the South Melbourne supporters are demanding. There's no such thing as coming second and it's a good effort, coming third and great effort, boys. Let's go again next year, or let's go again next week. If it's a draw, or there's a way you had to win, and they wanted to see entertaining football. They wanted to see a convincing result, and anything less than that was absolutely not good enough. There were games that I played in where we had won, and our supporters were not happy. They weren't happy. Yeah. So 3 points was never enough, and needed to be in a manner where they needed to be or feel entertained.
Was it harder for the Hellenic boys? So the Greek boys.
I think it was,
because you understood the language. You understand
that's exactly
what was being said, right?
Yeah.
And you had the Tanea and 3XY and
that's right.
Cosmos and these things being written about you.
Yeah.
The relatives got to, sort of make running commentary about these tussles and the expectation of being. So is that sideline banter that you get to hear?
Yeah, and you hear it all. And obviously sometimes, not sometimes, you understand everything that's being said. And for me, I thrive on that. That's something that I've always thrived on. I love that banter. I love that almost the abuse, the insults. The thing that got me though is obviously families in the crowd. And I know exactly what the parents are thinking or the relatives are thinking when abuse and insults are being thrown at you. And for me, that was my medicine into playing well week in, week out, just to prove all that negative vibe, or just to stamp out all that negativity. But I used to make it very clear to the family and friends, you've just got to keep tight-lipped and let me handle all that. You can't be sitting there fighting my battles. Let me fight those battles, and I'm sure I'll come on top in the end. So end up on top in the end. So but yeah, you're right. It was a bit of a heavy shot, but that's the nature of the beast. That's the club we're in, and you perfectly know what you're signing up for. You can't be one to say, oh, I'm playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world. Oh, sorry, in Australia, I should say, sorry. And in the same breath complaining that you're getting an insult thrown at you. It comes with the territory. And some people can handle it and go on to hopefully win, championships and premierships and all the rest of it. Others can't, and drop off. They fall off, and that's just the way it was.
So you win that first title. You've got one brother on one side, another brother on another side. That's quite a unique interaction. You've got another Sunshine Boy in the side. So Bill Damianos was in that.
He was in there as well. Yep.
So you had your longtime friend Steve Panopoulos also with you there.
Yep.
Let's call it, very much, Goran Lozanovsky. It was a glamour side, the South Melbourne team that year. Very much.
It was. But having said that, I think prior to that first championship, I mean, we were just a group of players where, with the exception of a handful with a high profile many of us did not have that sort of profile, and that almost put us on the map, I think. Well, me personally, I should probably speak on behalf of myself there. But it's funny that, and Ange always used to speak about this, where, when you end your careers, or when you finish up and you finally hang up your boots, and you've probably end up playing, your 200, 300, 400 games or whatever it is, as senior football, regardless of whatever level you're playing in. What you take to the grave are those moments where you've actually been successful. And those players that you've been successful with, you never, ever forget. You become brothers for life, and I think Ange was very clever in the way where he knew that after that first year, he had something special on his hands. That chemistry and that bond we had in that change room, we would not only run through brick walls for our coach, Ange, we would run through brick walls for our teammates. And that was, he added the extra 2 or 3 players as well. And and we obviously went on to beat Sydney United in our back-to-back championship, which was also pretty special because the first Oceania tournament was introduced.
Yes.
And then we went on to represent Oceania in Brazil in the year 2000, which was
and fairly respectable results as well, I might add. So, people say, you're coming up against, Vasco da Gama, Manchester United, where probably the wage bill of, their star players, the entire wage bill of the South Melbourne team. And I think you lost the first game against Manchester United 2-0, you know what I mean? That's respectable, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the first game we played was against Vasco da Gama. Yeah. So they were the South American champions. And, we came up against players like
Edmundo,
Romario. I mean, Romario was a player that I actually grew up with. I had a poster of him up on my bedroom wall. Yeah. So I remember when we first got there, and we had, I think we played in front of about 90,000 people the first game.
Wow.
But not your normal 90,000 And I'm not being disrespectful to the AFL crowd, but it wasn't your normal AFL 90,000 supporters. They were mad South American supporters. Where I think it was so. I remember being at the Maracana Stadium, all the dressing rooms and everything's underground.
Yeah.
And I remember, getting changed, and we're listening to Men at Work. That was one of Ange's favourite bands, and as we're listening to them, you look up in the ceiling and you can see the ceiling moving up and down.
Oh, wow.
It was, because obviously, correct, yeah. So as part of they're cheering and chanting. They dance and they do whatever they do and jumping up and down, and you could see it. And we're looking at each other thinking, where are we going? It was like something out of the Gladiator, So, but a funny story actually. I remember walking out in the players' race, and once again, you've got to walk a good 20, 30 meters. Pretty much in the dark. It's a very narrow players' race where you're coming from underground and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I remember we're the first ones out, and we're sort of we're sitting there waiting. And I said to myself, I'm not going to look to the because you can literally when they came out, you would have been rubbing shoulders with them because it was so narrow. And I said to myself, I'm not going to look to my, not going to look by my side to see who it is, because I don't want to feel intimidated, or I don't want to go out with a straight sort of face and ready to go to war. And so anyway, you can hear them coming out, and at the time I thought, how do I not look? I mean, I've waited all this time and here I am now rubbing shoulders with Romario, and it just happened to be Romario out of all people, So I've looked across to my right, and here I am. I've sort of smiled and nodded my head, sort of say hello. And he's giving me this look of disgust, like, who the hell are you to want to say hello to me? And I think it's a bad move. I shouldn't have looked at all. So, it was funny at the time, but yeah.
So it's interesting, you're playing against your childhood hero. You've got a poster up, and now you're sort of in the player race, and you almost expect the outcome to be, maybe I shake his hand. I was
starstruck, to be honest. I was a little bit, I'm not sure what the right word is, whether it was intimidated or whether I was just, I just froze almost, but. He's definitely let me know how he felt about the whole situation. So that was all good. But it was we went on to at halftime. It was actually 0-0, which was a really good result. We walked off obviously quite proud. They were booing their own team. That's how.
Wow. Because you were disciplined. You were holding them to.
That's right. And at the time, I mean, there were articles in the local papers in Brazil where they were almost, we were amateurs according to them, and we were, we were going to get belted, and it was going to be an easy game. And then all of a sudden, here we are, 0-0 at halftime, and it was actually quite refreshing watching their own supporters booing their team. But they actually ended up coming out and scoring 2 goals against us. So.
Yeah. So Edmundo was in that. You did say that he was in that side of Mundo Romario. That Vasco team. So did they went on to progress quite.
In that tournament,
I think they
got to the finals.
Runners up, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they got to the finals with against Corinthians, another Brazilian team.
That would have been a fantastic highlight, playing away. And who did you room with? Was it Steve that year?
Yeah, Steve Penny. Yeah. It was with him. I roomed with him for 7 years.
Okay. Yeah. So what was that?
We were like the odd couple, to be honest with you. Yeah, absolutely the odd couple. He was one where, he would be one where he wanted to sleep before games.
Okay.
So, he would switch the light off and close the curtains, and it was pitch black. And I'm thinking, it's 2:00 in the afternoon here. I can't do, this is not for me. I was curtains open, TV blaring. We would, like volume full ball. I would go for walks. So we were just totally opposite. absolutely opposite. And I remember the first couple of times we we had a few
Runnings.
we had a few a few runnings, but we ended up becoming best of friends, and even to this day we're still quite close, and we laugh over those days because we were absolutely the opposite.
Was the team tight? Because I actually saw a recent photo that I tagged you on Facebook. You standing in front of that statue in Rio.
Oh yes, yep.
So you made it to the top of the mountain. The whole team's there.
Yeah,
all the boys, and you look pretty happy, all of you, to be there.
Oh yeah. That was pretty special. I mean, I think that's credit to Ange as well. Like Ange he was always big on that whole making sure that yes, football's important, but he organised that day away, to go and see where we went, and he organised a few little like touristy attractions where we went along, and so he organised that, but not only for us. On that particular tournament, we had our wives and for some of the boys, our girlfriends also went to that tournament. They were staying at a separate hotel to us, and we were. But he would make sure that everything was inclusive and make sure that we all got to experience it and that's where he was very clever in the way he brought everyone together. It was more of a family type of club, and even though we all came from different parts of Australia, the chemistry and the bond between us was, and even by the end of that trip, even between the girls as well, it was it was quite strong. It was a great experience, probably one of the greatest experiences of my my soccer career, that's for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's one thing that no one can take away from you. You were champions of Asia. You got to play there at the Macarena and in front of all their fans. Fantastic. 2 championships with South Melbourne back to back, like you mentioned. Your 7 years headbutting. I don't know exactly, but it would have been somewhere between 150 and 200 games. Do you remember your sort of NSL career?
With South, I think it was around 175.
Okay.
Close to 180, and with Heidelberg, it's close to 200.
Okay.
Because I played a few. I played about 20 with Heidelberg as well. So
and I remember you then. I remember watching you then in the lower divisions afterwards. I think I tried to get you at Western Suburbs. I remember sitting at a table.
Yeah, I remember actually coming to that little meeting.
Your godfather, who's a big supporter at Western Suburbs, brought you down. I think that year you ended up signing with your brother at Barak Park.
Yeah, I went back to the grassroots only because at the time, my brother was heavily involved, and my father had lost his younger brother, and so I thought, I think family is probably more important than playing at the highest level. I've done 10 years of it, so I wanted to spend a year at close to my brother, and I ended up going back there. So for a year.
Good on you. That would have been that sort of full circle. You would have taken the Mickey, and then after that, you continued to.
After that, so they were in State 1 at the time. Yeah, they were in State 1, but after that, I got itchy feet again, and I wanted to go play in the Premier League once again. Yeah, so
Essendon Royals, was it?
Essendon Royals. Yeah, Michael Michalakopoulos was the coach there, and went to Essendon Royals for a year, and then I moved to Kingston.
Yes.
Under George Katsakis for another year.
Yeah, they were splashing some big money there back then.
Yeah, they were. That was out in Clayton. Yeah.
Were you there the same when Joe Spiteri was there? Were you there?
That's right. So Joe Spiteri, Alex Kiritzoglu, We had Joe Diorio,
Yeah. It
Conantopoulos,
was all more or less an NSL team. It was like,
Sturgopoulos. It was, yeah.
yeah.
Casija was there as well. Michael Toombul, remember
Yes, Mike Turnbull.
the Bachelor?
The Bachelor. Yes.
Yeah. So we had a decent squad on paper. Absolutely, we did. Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting times are sort of like that fail. You think about the complete opposite of building a team.
Yeah.
What Ange did at South Melbourne.
That's right.
Bring a bunch of young kids, give them faith, bench 3 internationals.
Yeah, right? That's right.
On the precipice of potentially getting sacked, to then go on and win back-to-back championships. And what Kingston was trying to do is basically buy
what a contrast, eh?
Buy a flag, right?
Yeah.
So and you've experienced all that. Talk to me about now the characters. So if you had to sort of say, okay, over 7 years at South, who are the people that sort of would just crack you up in the dressing room, or just be, okay, can't believe he said that?
There was a few along the way. I mean, the one that stands out would have to be, and I'm still very close with him to this day, Fausto Diamicis is one who is a dear friend of mine as well, but he was one where, given he had played in arguably, for me, one of the greatest NSL teams of all time, with the Melbourne Knights, having
Melbourne, Croatia,
Croatia, he played with Mark Viduka and Joe Biskic and Joe Spiteri and Steve Horvath and Silic and some pretty big names in there.
And won titles with him.
He won a back-to-back with them, actually. Yeah. So when he came across, he was almost a little bit intimidating, and you would think to yourself, all right, well, this is a guy where you almost can't look at him the wrong way, or he was probably one of the biggest clowns in that change room. Very down to earth, very grounded, but one where that he would absolutely be one to rely on when you went out on the pitch. He can certainly he can play football. That's for sure.
Amazing how many of those boys have gone on to coach football. Yourself, obviously, Gora Lozanovsky, Fausto Diamicis is coaching now, Vaughan Coveney, Cressida.
Johnny A. Yeah.
It's a plethora, all of you boys have sort of gone on to coach at various levels. I mean, Johnny A is now in the
West United,
United A League, set up as an assistant there, and but a lot of mentality. Do you think? What did you take? Because you're coaching now at Western Eagles Bologna, and you've coached at many clubs. What did you take of the coaches that you have played under?
Yeah.
How's that sort of formulated your own sort of coaching ethos?
I think to sum it up in one word, and I know it's the good old cliche, if you like, but to sum it up in one word, for me, it's all about attitude. It has to be. Yeah. And that's one where Ange I think he lives and breathes by it. He was one where I will give you what you give me. So you give me 100%, I'll give you 100%. If the moment you put your individual goals ahead of the team goal, you wouldn't last under Ange. You absolutely wouldn't. Because, as I said earlier, he was one where, you put the team goal first and doors will open for you. They will absolutely open for you. But the minute you don't do the right thing out in the pitch or even off the pitch, or you won't last. He wasn't one where, you wouldn't tolerate that sort of, for him, it was, you should be feeling privileged that you're playing at a high level. Many people would drop everything to be in the position you're in. It's a privileged position you're in, so don't take advantage of it and take it serious and give 110%, because there's only a small window, of playing at a level where, or doing something that you absolutely love and you feel passionate about, and one day it all comes to an end. So, So back to what I said in my opening, attitude is everything. It absolutely is everything. Sometimes, it's a little bit difficult in the lower divisions because people have livelihoods, people work, people have families, and they've got to put those things first, and so they should. So you've almost got to, you have to, you've got to turn a blind eye to
compromise a little bit.
Yeah, correct.
But at the level that you were playing at, it was like people were, even though you were part-time, it was treated serious.
It was absolutely serious. I just think in my days at South of Melbourne, I can never, ever, ever recall a day where I was late to training, let alone match day. I can't recall a day where I forgot a pair of socks or a piece of, clothing or a pot. That was almost laugh. Yeah, no, that would never happen. Absolutely wouldn't happen.
So now, we're speaking to that 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old boy or girl looking to make that transition from junior football to sort of senior football. And then it's now happening later and later,
Yeah.
So when you played football, how old were you when you made your senior debut at East Altona Park? How old were you?
18. Yeah.
That notion that the person that's transitioning now from junior football to senior football, I mean, you've got a self that's in that sort of that years. What advice do you have to that 16, 17, 18-year-old boy or girl?
For me, I think it's, and this is probably something where my father had taught me at a very, very young age, you never look too far ahead, and you can't control things you never worry about things that you can't control. So hard work and opportunities will open, but the hard work starts now and today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about next week. Don't worry about next month, next year, in 10 years' time. I know, in the corporate world, we talk about having short-term plans, having long-term plans, where you're going to be in 3 years, where you're going to be in 5 years. But as you know, in sport, you can have a 5-year plan, but all it takes, you're one tackle away from ending your career.
Yep.
So it's probably not a great, yes, you have ambition and you can have that in the back of your mind, but to feel that disappointment in the under 17s, for example, for being dragged or sitting on the bench, this is your apprenticeship. You're doing your apprenticeship. You need to feel that way. You need to go through those motions and those emotions, and learn those lessons and build that capability or that resilience to overcome those moments, to run away and have, for example, your mum or dad fight those battles. For me, I cannot. I to this day I still can't. I don't understand. I really don't understand that. In my day, if I went to my dad and said to my dad, listen, I got benched and he goes, well, that's your fault. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it to get back into the team? What are you doing about it to play a full game next time? What work have you done outside of your 2 nights a week or 3 nights a week? Because let's be honest, when we're talking about someone who, do you think he will make it? Now, what does that mean exactly? Make it compared to who? Compared to our overseas counterparts? Because if we're comparing ourselves to overseas, they're not training 3 nights a week. They're not training 6 hours a week, and playing one 90-minute game, in 7. If we're truly comparing ourselves to those players from overseas, these guys are putting in 20, 30. It's their full-time job outside of their full-time job. And I think if we truly want to compare ourselves to these guys, you got to put in the work. And if you're not putting in the work, then we shouldn't be asking silly questions like that. I mean, that's just, I think it's the hard work. And I even think, even with the NPL system or I don't think 3 nights a week, if we're truly wanting to get to that next level, is enough. I really don't. And I understand, people have got jobs and schooling and all the rest of it, but they should at least be doing something outside of those training hours, you know.
Individual
because
work. Yeah.
absolutely, because you can't compete with somebody who's training and playing and breathing and sleeping full-time soccer. You just can't. You can't. You know, there may be the occasional game where you know, a semi-professional team might beat a professional team, but 9 times out of 10, I'll put my money down on that professional team that they'll win the majority of the time, and more than the majority of the time. So,
fantastic words of wisdom for somebody who is very humble about their serviceability, and you definitely, you know, 200 odd NSL games, very serviceable, and you played many more after that as well. Thank you very much for your continued contribution to Australian football. Yosa, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm proud to call you a friend. Thanks for this conversation.
Thanks, Sash. Thanks for having me on your podcast, mate. And I'm sure we'll cross paths out in the trenches there, mate.
Cheers.
Good on you. Cheers.
Hey guys, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our wonderful guest. If you like this type of content and would like to see more, how about you hit the like and subscribe button? And have a fantastic day.